Meet the Mets, meet the Mets. Step right up and greet the Mets. Bring your kiddies, bring your wife. Guaranteed to have the time of your life, because the Mets are really socking the ball, knocking those home runs over the wall. East side, west side, everybody's coming down to meet the METS Mets of New York town. Oh, the butcher and the baker and the people on the streets, where do they go? To meet.
What's up, Mets fans? Welcome back to another Mets Roundtable Podcast right here on all of our channels. So hopefully everybody is doing well. And we actually had October baseball for just one day for our New York Mets. And it was exactly the way the 2023 season went. Bad defense, bad offense, bad pitching, and an embarrassment. So we're going to get right into it. And I just want to say what up to everybody. Nelson, Chris, Hayden, how you guys doing? Hopefully everybody is doing well. And there is a new era of Mets baseball, and it starts with David Stern. So let's say what up quickly to everybody. Hayden, Chris, Nelson. Hayden, how you doing?
Yeah, what's going on, everyone? Mets Talk with Hayden is here. I'm kind of in football mode, as you guys can tell, repping the Bills Mafia jersey after the great game yesterday, but we're here to talk about the Mets, not football. But yeah, Mets Talk with Hayden is the name. I know I've been a little inactive. Haven't really done anything in about 3 weeks or so. That lies on me. I've just been mentally checked out and slammed with a lot of stuff. So, maybe next week I'm going to try and clear out some of my schedule to maybe do like, the traditional Mets Talk live stream. I definitely want to do a season recap and kind of my thoughts on the Buck Showalter and David Stern's stuff. So, otherwise good to be here. And, let's go Mets. And we got a great off season ahead of us and playoff baseball.
Yeah. What's up, Chris?
What up? What up? New season, new era, new beginnings, new everything, new manager. I love it. It's a completely new outlook on the New York Mets, and I couldn't be more excited. I think it's a good fresh slate. I've been seeing a lot of whining and moaning about, the decisions that are being made amongst the Mets Twitter, and that's just the Mets fan base in a nutshell. I was in the actual press conference on YouTube from SNY's live stream. Saw a lot of, not going to say the words, but definitely some complaining going on. And I can't understand how any Mets fan can be complaining right now. But yeah, we're going to be talking about it. So CP New York Sports got a lot of different shows under my umbrella popping off. Feeling blue for the Giants. Rangers one coming up for basketball or for hockey season. Got Knicks talk. So a lot of different stuff going on. So appreciate you guys tapping in with me, and let's talk some New York Mets.
All right. Sounds good. Nelson, what's up, buddy?
Oh, sorry, I had to take myself off mute. I'm good. Just fighting off the Jeff McNeil stands on X and living the dream. Excited that Buck is gone and Stearns is officially at the helm. But yeah, Amish Country Mets fan here. Check out the channel if you haven't already. Please subscribe. I'd appreciate it. Awesome to be here with you guys to kind of wrap up the season, and we'll have some interesting stuff to talk about.
Absolutely. All right. So David Stern press conference was very interesting. There was a couple of comments in there, a couple of things that, of course, it's basically all the topics today that David Stern's was asked about, and what he said that kind of opened up a little bit of eyes when it came to certain people like Buck Showalter. They already had to clear the air because it already looked bad the way it happened with Buck yesterday, and he kind of cleared it up, but it still felt kind of weird because I was at the tailgate before the game, and it went down that Buck Showalter is not coming back, and he talked about it in his pregame press conference, and it was weird how it happened. It was kind of awkward, and you saw right away David Stearns and Steve Cohen defending themselves on how they did it. Steve Cohen talked about the playoffs coming up, and they had a short amount of time, and David Stearns says he wasn't allowed to speak to anybody from the Mets or Buck Showalter because he was still under contract of the Brewers, even though the Mets been speaking to David Stearns for about 3 years now. But I guess, they tried to defend themselves. I mean, I thought it was hilarious that they tried to, but it is what it is. But the more important things is what Steve Cohen and David Stearns said. And there was two things that really came out was the Alonso comment about David Stearns. More people took it a little bit more insanely crazy than others on Mets Twitter. If you were following Mets Twitter throughout the press conference, the Alonso comment when he says, yeah, Alonso will be our first baseman next year, and didn't really go into, much more than that. And that's strategic, obviously. But when he said that, and the way he's like, oh, he's homegrown, he's a great ball player, he's this, he's that. It seemed like a guy that I wouldn't say really I don't know how much he likes Pete Alonso. I think there's something there, more to it than that meets the eye. I guarantee you he was part of this whole conversation with Alonso and the Brewers and the Mets. I think he has more to do with that than we actually think. And we'll know because if there's no extension this offseason, even though the Mets have no problem with making guys go to free agency like Nimmo, Diaz kind of went to free agency, and obviously McNeil didn't, but they don't mind sending their guys to free agency and then signing them a little bit later. So with that said, the comment that he didn't really, it was more strategic than anything else. So I'm going to go to Hayden first, the biggest Pete Alonso fan I know. When David Stearns says, yeah, he'll be our first baseman next year, kind of opens up some eyes on Mets Twitter. And a lot of people, and even on, I saw Chris on the SNY YouTube channel as well. And people weren't happy with, they had a lot of stupid comments, but what do you think when you heard that? And if you didn't hear that, that's basically what he said. Oh, he'll be our first baseman next year. What does that tell you? Is that him just being strategic, or is that him, basically telling you, I'm going to keep my options open?
Yeah, I mean, I guess to start things off first, I mean, I caught most of the David Stearns introduction press conference. I watched it a little bit earlier today, and yeah, I mean, overall, I was impressed. I thought he killed it. I thought he did well. I thought he said everything that every Met fan essentially wanted to hear. Cohen, kind of cleared the air about the whole Buck Showalter situation, and I kind of concurred with that. David Stearns coming in, he's the president of baseball operations, and I think he's entitled and has the right to, bring in his guys. Obviously, I think in a lot of, sport franchises, it can get very complex when you have, so many guys from different front offices originally. And what was interesting is Stearns kind of took that and said, well, that's unique. That's good. But, obviously he's entitled to bring in his manager or, whoever he wants to bring in essentially. So, sorry. So I thought, that was good. He cleared up the air with that. We talked about how, grew up in New York. He was a Met fan. He snuck into Shea Stadium, which I mean, I can't really imagine doing that today. But he pretty much said what needed to be said. He talked about what this team is going to look like down the line, how they're going to be competitive, and let Rappler live to Scherzer. Good for him. But overall, I mean, I enjoyed the press conference. I thought Stearns touched everything that was really needed to be touched. Everything from competing next year to finding a manager, to building the team from success all the ways around, from the farm system to free agency to the offseason, and what the outlook is going to be for this organization and how they are going to be competitive. And I guess kind of answering your question, Rob, when it comes to Alonso, I believe it. I think he is going to be, quote, quote, the opening day first baseman next year. I don't think if it were true, I don't really see why he would say it. I think for an introduction press conference, then why would he say it? He could say something in a week from now that could completely contradict that. Why would he say it? He acknowledged he's homegrown. He's homegrown talent. He's a guy that produces so much. Stearns took a value in that. We know Stearns is a big believer in, power hitting, all these hardcore analytics, barrel metrics, all that stuff. And, Alonso qualifies under that. So overall, I think when it comes to it, I think Stearns was, being honest when it came to the whole, Pete Alonso situation that he will be the opening day first baseman next year. And I mean, being honest, I wouldn't be surprised if some more stuff goes on. And I mean, if I'm David Stearns, the first thing I'm doing in November is working an extension with Alonso. That should be one of the top priorities out there. And yeah, so I think it's going to be interesting to see what happens with Alonso this offseason, with whether it's an extension or I guess that would really only be it. So yeah, otherwise impressed with David Stearns, and I think the new era of Stearns is going to be important. Just last thing to touch on is this is your guy. Cohen waited 3 years for him, and this is your guy. So you really want to get this right. You really want to come off with a good first impression. We know Cohen talked about how complex it could be to find the right guy. And this team has gone from, one guy to another, to another, to another. And, well, this is your president of baseball ops. This is your GM. And it'll be good that Cohen can kind of take a step back. Because as much as I may be a little hard on Cohen, for an owner, I've never seen that many owners involved. So it's good he wants to be, but I think it'll be nice. Cohen could take a little bit of a step back and give David Stearns a little bit more control, and obviously Billy Epler as well.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a good conversation, right? Oh, good comment and opinion, especially with the big Alonso fan I know you are. All right, Chris. So what did you think about what Stearns has said, especially with, his defense of Buck, no matter if you like Buck or not, one of them fired or not, and then the Alonso comment that he made? Chris, we can't hear you. All right, guys. So, Nelson, what do you got? Wait for Chris to come back. Sorry. That's why
I'll jump in his spot real quick. Yeah, as far as the Buck thing, I mean, if you take Stearns at his word, he couldn't really do anything or say anything about it. So it sounds like he just made it known to Cohen that he wanted to pick his own guy. As far as the timing and how that went down, I don't know what happened there. It almost seems like they wanted to announce it before the season was over, but I don't know if they necessarily wanted to do it the way Buck did. I think Buck kind of took it upon himself to tell that to everybody. I don't know that the Mets were necessarily ready for him to say that. I don't know. It was just a weird situation, but I mean, it is what it is. It's what's done is done. It was going to happen regardless.
Yeah.
Did they fumble it a little bit? Maybe. If you want to nitpick, I guess they did. But I mean, I wanted him gone, so I don't have a problem with it. It is what it is. As far as the Alonso comment, Hayden's right. He didn't have to say that. He could have twisted his words and said something. He could have been more vague. He pretty much admitted that their plan is to keep him to be the opening day starter. You are correct in that doesn't mean that they won't let him get to free agency, but I would think, I don't know, I wouldn't think that's something he wants to let fester that long. Like, I think he's going to want to lock him up, because if you roll into opening day with Alonso not locked up, then you're starting to lose leverage for a move if you have to make one. So you kind of need to get that done sooner than later, because if you lose leverage, then whatever you get, if you do have to trade him, then whatever you get in return is going to be a lot less for an actual rental. Right now, you can argue he's not technically a rental if you trade him early, but you wait till in season, then whoever's getting him is getting him just getting a rental, and they're not gonna want to give you the pieces that you want in return. So I'd look for that to get locked up. I think it's gonna happen. I don't know. I just get that feeling. I liked everything else I heard from him. Good to have a guy that's definitely invested in the team. He's a Mets fan. He said that. He's excited to have his kids grow up Mets fans. So it's good to see. I'm pretty pumped. I know some people are not happy. Some people are never happy, but it is what it is.
Yes. Chris, check 1 2.
Check 1 2. Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right, there we go. I was starting to say you guys couldn't hear me. I don't necessarily think I care. Following up on Nelson's point of how the Buck firing was announced. Yeah, maybe it wasn't in the best light, but as you said, Rob, there are certain things Stearns couldn't do while being under that contract, and I feel like this decision was a long time coming already. I mean, we've been speculating on this, on the Interstate Mets report with Nelson and I for quite some time now. Interesting to see. I know Lindor, and then previously when we started this show tonight, Hayden was talking about Pete Alonso, the whole situation about going to Steve Cohen directly with the Buck firing. I don't doubt that Buck Showalter has his supporters in that clubhouse, and does that suck? Yes, but at the end of the day, as you also said, you should have performed this year. If you really wanted to play for your guy and you wanted him to stick around, you should have played well, because at that point it would have gave Stearns at least a second thought and been like, all right, maybe I will give him this next year as a sort of, I guess, intermediate sort of year on his last year of his contract, that 3-year deal he got. So David Stearns is fully entitled to his own guy taking over. And I think I saw one of the comments here, I think it was Easy that said, this next guy, this manager, is going to have a little bit of a unique situation. I'm not sure how much of a full reign this new manager is going to have. I think that David Stearns might be calling a lot more of the shots from the front office. And I don't doubt that we've seen that this year with Buck Showalter and some of his decision making as well, in terms of the personnel, in terms of the in-game decisions. Like, that's where I will give Buck Showalter credit, because there's a fine line when you move towards the new era of baseball and you have these more analytic driven decisions. And it's always tough on a manager. So I will give Buck the benefit of the doubt there. I wish him nothing but the best. I don't see him getting picked up by anybody else. So if that's a career, he goes back to TV, it is what it is. But moving forward, David Stearns said all of the right things, 100%. Quick side note, that YouTube comment section, that live chat on SNY was absolutely pathetic. Calling out David Stearns using filler words like and for like, and going at his college degree because he's using these filler words. Like, give me a break. Come on. This is absolutely ridiculous. Like, I'm sure someone comes up here on camera in front of, the world, and they're going to start, fumbling with their words a little bit. So that's absolutely ridiculous. But yeah, man, the Pete Alonso talk, he did not have to say that. You're 100% right, Nelson. It's great that he did say it. I don't think that any one of us really foresaw him legitimately getting traded. But yeah, I think it's great. You lock him up, make sure that's the first thing you do. I think that's the first thing you have to do, right? You can't have this festering into the new season. You lose that leverage. All great points here. It's a shame I'm going last because I have to reiterate what these gentlemen have already said. But yeah, I'm happy. I'm thrilled. Pete Alonso, listen, I get the idea that people are scared about him moving forward and how he's going to age with his power numbers, with his average. I get all that. But Pete Alonso's don't grow on trees. We've been saying this for months. You know what I mean? You don't let a guy like this walk and chance that you're going to match his production over 2 or 3 guys coming up, especially when you have as much talent you do coming up in this minor league system. So listen, David Stearns, I have no doubt about it that he's going to do a great job. I know this is just cliche talk, but he is a Mets fan at the end of the day. Steve Cohen's a Mets fan as well. Having that sort of leverage as well when you're actually believing in the work that you're doing, maybe in comparison to some of the guys that we've had at the helm previously, always helps, always makes me feel better. I know the Mets haven't, like, it's all cliche talk that we're saying up here. We're trying to be optimistic and positive because obviously we had a lackluster season in 2023, throughout the board, but it is what it is. I'm not going to sit here and not give this guy a chance. He was one of the best candidates available. Steve Cohen waited for him all these years, and he got the guy. There's nothing else that you can want in terms of an operational standpoint from your owner, right? So I'm curious to see. We'll get into the managerial talk. He wasn't going to commit in terms of whether he at least knew which route he's planning to take in terms of an actual manager and a name, but I'm happy he got the Pete Alonso discussion out of the way, addressed it first and foremost, and put that to bed, so we don't have to sit here and speculate all off season if that's going to happen. So I'm excited. It's a new era, like you said, and like the screen says, it's a new era of Mets baseball. I think a lot of people, especially in this chat, if you're a Mets fan, if you're a diehard, I think you should be excited. I'm not going to tell you how to fan. We should be excited.
Absolutely. And, those are all great points. And yeah, listen, and I said it on the live during the press conference, I said, there's one thing that I really liked. I wouldn't say he's necessarily cocky. He came off as that a little bit, but he came off as very confident. Like, he didn't read from a piece of paper. You could tell it was from the heart and from the mind. And he had a lot of arms and butts. I mean, listen, he's a fan of this team. Anybody would have been in that. If any of us got the great opportunity to be the Mets president of baseball ops or general manager, knowing that you love this team from basically birth, yeah, you're going to be a little bit nervous. And he didn't show it, but of course you're going to have a little bit of nerves. This is the team he roots for. So I agree with what everybody said here. David Stearns, we know what he did in Milwaukee with limited resources. Now he's going to have the resources and the smarts. And there's a couple of things that he's got to put together a staff for the minor league system. Remember, they fired a lot of developmental staff, a lot of coaching, all types of different, executive branch of the minor leagues. Steve Cohen fired all them. So David Stern's going to bring in a lot of people here of his ilk, of the people he trusts when it comes to drafting and international signings and all that stuff. So that's something that we're going to see going forward with David Stern. So why I put competitive in 2024 in quotation marks is because we heard that a lot over the 2023 season with Steve Cohen's. He said that in the press conference he had that, yes, we're going to be competitive. And people took that as, they're not really going to spend a lot of money or try. And then you heard the exact same words coming out of David Stearns' mouth today. And if MLB ever wanted to get the Mets on tampering, they can just use those lines. Because clearly they spoke about this, and what was coming out of Steve Cohen's mouth was probably coming from the mouth of David Stearns much earlier than this. And I do think David Stearns had a say in what happened at the trade deadline. I truly believe that, and nobody's going to change my mind on that. So we're going to skip the competitive in 2024. I just thought it was funny that David Stearns said the exact same comment, and somebody put it on Twitter, what Stern said and what Cohen said, and it's the exact same line, word for word. So I thought that was funny. So managerial candidates, David Stern said there's going to be a wide net. We know the obvious choices of candidates that we've all talked about. A lot of people are talking about Bob Melvin if he gets fired from the Padres. Phil Nevin just got fired, but I don't think he's a candidate. I don't really know at this point. Everybody knows about Craig Counsell. I think he's probably the favorite. On the poll that I did earlier today on YouTube, you can say that a lot of people believe it's going to be Counsell. I don't think people believe it's going to be Counsell because they like that choice. They just think it's going to happen. So, Nelson, I'm going to start with you. All the candidates that there's probably going to be, probably people we never heard of. There's going to be a lot of managers that have no experience and a lot of managers that have a ton of experience with winning and losing, mostly losing, which most managers that don't have a job are mostly losers. So, Nelson, managerial candidates, if you had somebody out of the blue, if it's not somebody that has been mentioned or Craig Counsell, who do you think could be like a dark horse in this race?
I mean, honestly, there's multiple guys. If you skip over Counsell, you can go immediately to his right-hand man in Pat Murphy, the bench coach in Milwaukee. He was a finalist, not during when Buck got hired, but before that, I think when Beltran got hired, he was a finalist. Another Joe Espada, another guy that's been a finalist before. He's a hot name. I don't know what Dusty's doing in Houston. They've kind of been grooming him to take that job eventually, but I don't know if Dusty ever plans on retiring. So we'll see what goes on there. I'd look out for him. I do like him. He doesn't have managerial experience, obviously. Neither does Murphy. And Beltran, his name's going to come up, obviously. A name that I don't think will be available, but if he did become available, I'd jump on immediately is Alex Cora. Don't know exactly what the Red Sox are doing over there, but that's a guy I definitely look into. I know guys that I wouldn't touch, and that's Gabe Kapler. Have no desire. Bob Melvin at all. I've heard Mike Schilt's name mentioned, but I don't think he fits the philosophy of David Stearns. He part of what got him canned in St. Louis was anti-analytics, and obviously Stearns is not anti-analytics, so that I don't think that's a fit per se. Chavez is obviously probably going to come up. I'm sure he'll get an interview. Like he said in the press conference, it's going to be a wide net. They're going to talk to a lot of people. For me, I'd probably swing my vote to Espada as my leading candidate. But I'd be happy with a few others. I like Murphy as well. And obviously people are going to think Counsell is going to come here. I'm not so sure. But we'll see. It's going to be an interesting development how that all works out. And I'm sure they're going to try to get it done as quick as possible. So I'm sure he'll be lining up candidates as soon as he can, and then get somebody hired like shortly after the World Series.
Yeah, exactly. And, the thing with Craig Counsell, his team's in the playoffs. If they go deep in the playoffs, you can't speak to him until after the World Series, and candidates might get off the table, especially if more teams like the Angels just fired Phil Nevin. A couple of others might be fired over the coming days, so we'll see how that goes. So, Chris, managerial candidates, you have a dark horse?
I don't know if I have a dark horse. This is a really interesting topic to me, just because, like I said in the previous discussion here, which of these guys that we just named, right, are going to relinquish that sort of power and have that fall under them? Like, even if you're a first-year manager, are you really going to want your first your first crack at a managerial spot to come from in a position where you're going to be handed down instructions from the front office? So I don't really know. It's going to be kind of tough, to be honest with you. That's why I believe in the right decision being made if it's feasible, right? And like you guys said, we don't know yet, which is speculation by Craig Counsell. I think they already have that working tandem, which is why I think it'd be, it would work really well, to be honest with you. I don't really necessarily see a problem with Bob Melvin. I don't know really much about him. I know the Padres were a dumpster fire. I don't really think that was anything with his doing, to be honest with you. I would be fine with Bob Melvin. I'd be in on him. Obviously, I think Cora is the option that we would all probably go with as 1A if he presented himself, but I'm not so sure that's going to be a possibility. I want to say Chavez, and I want to give him a chance. I don't think it's going to come with the New York Mets, unfortunately. I think he's going to be a great manager somewhere else. I just don't think it's going to be for the New York Mets, because I'm not confident David Stearns wants to promote internally, to be honest with you. At least now for the managerial spot. I would love for him to remain on the staff, but I know he's going to get some interviews, and best of luck to him, because I know that he'll do a great job, and I know he's a really well-liked guy in that clubhouse too. So I don't really know any sort of dark horses. I was going to say Kapler, but looking back on the Giants and some of the interactions I've seen with Kapler and the players, he seems like a very hard-headed guy. He seems like he's I don't know. I don't want to make any speculations, but I was gonna say Kapler's my dark horse just because that was one of the only guys that got fired. What do we have? 4 managers already around the league that got fired. I think it was, with Phil Nevin just being one of their most recent ones. So I think the clear-cut favorite here is definitely Craig Counsell. I know that's a cliche answer, but just the connections are too strong there, especially with the working tandem that they already had in Milwaukee. But I think Bob Melvin would be a fine candidate, to be honest with you. I don't know too much about this Spada guy. I think he's in the Astros. He's going to be yeah. I don't know too much about him, to be honest with you. I think Nelson's been doing his own research on him. I think that I've heard good things. I know he was a finalist that 1 year as well, like Nelson just said. So I don't have any dark horses, but I just think that if the worlds align perfectly, I think the best situation would be to have Craig Counsell. I know that it's a little bit of a slippery slope when you bring a tandem over from a different organization that hasn't won a World Series. But when you look at the situational differences and you look at what they've accomplished in Milwaukee, having a tandem like that with the assets of Steve Cohen, we've said this before, I think I'd sign up for that all day long, to be honest with you. The front office has put the Milwaukee Brewers in a position to go for and make a run at the World Series, right? Their talent lacking is just another thing, and I guess Woodruff just got hurt for them as well, which is unfortunate news going into their playoff run. But yeah, give me Craig Counsell. Like I said, I just want to go back to the Buck Showalter talk just quickly. I
Yeah.
don't like. I know everyone. I know Nelson and I were definitely on board with not having Buck Showalter. I just want to say first and foremost though that like MEZ said in the chat, I do respect what he accomplished with the Mets in his tenure, especially last year in 2022. And I am grateful that he did bring winning baseball back to New York. If it was only for 1 year, so be it. But yeah, I just want to say that piece real quick because I think that Buck, like you said, it's important to call that out when you have so many stories of these players, especially within the Mets organization right now moving forward, that had so much respect for Buck. So, but to just touch up on the last point, I think Craig Counsell makes sense. It's a perfect situation. It's a perfect tandem to take over New York baseball. So I think that would be my final answer.
Yeah, and yeah, I agree with you. And the safest route is probably Craig Counsell, right? Because Stearns obviously trusts him, even though he got the job and Counsell was already there, but they built a good relationship, which is something that sometimes it's just not easy. And like you said, Chris, it's not easy to actually find somebody who is want to have that partnership, which we'll get into the philosophy in a little bit. The partnership is important because the manager doesn't have full control over the lineup anymore, the bullpen anymore. Like it's all predetermined for the most part before a game as they work together on, giving guys days off, what bullpen arms you're going to use in certain situations, the lineup that should be used against a righty or lefty. It's not just the manager making those decisions anymore. It's the GM, it's the analytical department, it's God knows who else. So, Hayden, managerial candidates, who would you like to see as manager, and do you have a dark horse?
Yeah. So I guess just to touch on the one thing that you just said, Rob, and I agree with that point entirely. You look at it, the manager position it's not what it was 15, 20 years ago. I mean, you look back at, the Bobby Valentine era. The manager position has evolved a lot. You have all these predetermined stuff, the analytical team. It's really a conjoint and combined effort now. But that's besides the point. I think when it comes down to managerial candidates, a lot of it's still fresh. It's 2 years ago we were talking about managerial candidates, and it's a lot of similar guys minus Buck Showalter in this case. I think when it comes to it, my ideal candidate would be on the younger side. I think that we need to go a little bit younger. No disrespect to obviously some of the veteran and older managers, but I just think it's better to go a little bit younger. Yes, I think experience counts, but I think we need a mixture of that, and you need a mixture of that old school mentality and analytics. I think that's important in baseball nowadays. So if we can get a nice mix of that, that would be great. The whole belief that Buck was anti-analytic, it was a bunch of nonsense from the beginning. But a mixture of analytics and that old school mentality would be nice. Just someone on the younger side. Craig Counsell probably would be the guy that I would assume and would be my ideal candidate, considering he literally we just got David Stearns, so I don't really think I need to explain why. But Craig Counsell would be one. People have talked about Gabe Kapler. Nah, I'm not. No, I mean, I get it. Some of the Giants' issues with front office space, but I don't think he's a great manager. How he handled that bullpen, how he handled that team, I don't think was great. Beltran, I think, would be interesting. I'd like to see him maybe have a little bit more coaching experience. I know he's in the front office, but maybe get some coaching experience under his belt. Maybe in a couple of years he could be a potential name. Joe Espada, definitely a name we talked about 2 years ago. He was one of the 3 candidates 2 years ago. He could definitely be a candidate. And Alex Cora, I definitely think a reasonable guy, has a good resume. A lot of the Red Sox inadequate past 2 seasons were more so in the front office, Hein Bloom, rather than Alex Cora. He came back from the whole cheating scandal, and you saw he brought that 2021 season. And I get it. He's had his bad moments. He's had his good moments, and so has everyone. So Buck, Boone, whoever the manager is. But I think Cora could be a reasonable candidate. So right now, I think probably my top 2 candidates that I would envision, based off of likelihood to happen and who I would like, it's probably Craig Counsell and Alex Cora. I mean, I can't really anticipate anyone internally in the Met system right now that would take over. I don't really think anyone's that experienced, yet alone just has the likelihood to become it. But I think it's going to be interesting, and I wouldn't be surprised if it's some random guy that no one that was completely under the radar. I mean, I think when the Mets hired Buck in was it like November 2021, I think he was a decent guy to get the job. I think it was really between him and whoever the guy is for the Royals. I forgot his name, and then Espada, something with a Q. I forgot. Like Matt Quatraro, I think was his name. I think he's the Royals manager now. Yeah, I know that those were kind of like the three finals. So I wouldn't be surprised if we kind of have something like that again. But you definitely would like to get a manager. I think that'd be a good goal. And it definitely could take some time. So we'll see how it goes. But I think Council and Cora, the two C candidates, I think are probably the two that I would anticipate right now. Bob Melvin, if he gets fired, there's no guarantee he does, but if he does get fired, he could be a potential candidate. Yeah, I'm a little questionable of him too. But yeah, that's really all I got.
Yeah, and I know somebody brought up Wally Backman. Listen, guys, that's a DUI waiting to happen once again. Just
he'd wake up that clubhouse, that's for sure.
You know, Dan, but you know what? You know what? With this, soft-minded team and mentally soft team, Wally Backman would have them crying in a corner. Like, no, it ain't gonna work. Wally Backman's way of managing and getting in people's faces does not work no more in baseball. These guys will fall to their knees and cry like babies. They're not the same ilk like the 90s players and the 80s and the 70s players. They don't got that thick skin anymore. They just don't. And look, Wally Backman, the Mets had him in the organization managing, and he basically pushed himself out of a job because of his stupidity, his drinking, his DUIs, and God knows what else. It's not going to happen with Wally Backman. I know the Wilpons had a bad situation with him, and it's Steve Cohen, the new owner, but as much as Steve Cohen probably loves the 80s Wally Backman, you can't bring him to this team, especially when you have a core here that you have these guys in their prime. You don't need a manager to basically scare them to death. And, they can barely perform under pressure now. Let's not put a manager that, they're going to be on pins and needles for 162. It's just not happening. So with the philosophy that David Stearns, at least we think David Stearns is going to bring, I mean, if you look at his teams in Milwaukee, it's pitching and power. That's two of the things that is very, very noted with the Brewers. And the average is really not there with a lot of the Brewers players. The bullpen and the rotation is usually pretty good, but average is not there. If I'm not mistaken, I think they're middle of the pack in stolen bases even this year. So they're not a very, how analytics is not very big on stolen bases either. So I do wonder what the philosophy when Cohen says, we have the same philosophical opinions and thoughts about what we want going forward. I don't know what that is. I guess we can all speculate because that's what we're doing. So Chris, I'm going to start with you. What do you think David Stern's philosophy with the resources now, because that's going to change, having a philosophy when it comes to, no resources and you have to draft well and international signing, you have to do all that well. Now with the resources, do you think his philosophy is going to change just a little bit because of the resources he has with Steve Cohen?
I'm not sure if it's going to change necessarily. I think it changes by default just because of what resources he has, not because of Steve Cohen. Well, I guess you could say probably Steve Cohen, but also Billy Epler in terms of what he has in the minor league farm system. So he has to, what he prioritizes has to also take into account who he plans on, eventually panning out in the major leagues from the farm system. There's only 9 spots. We say this all the time. I mean, you have the likes of Acuna coming up, Gilbert coming up, and then Jet Williams is also on the rise too. Got to figure out what to do with Mauricio as well. So if he really is all about power, I can see him sticking with Mauricio. I know that he's another guy who we just don't know what his future is going to be like with the New York Mets. But I don't think, we all know that he loves pitching. Personally, what I would do, and I would try to mimic what the Rays do. I know it's something that's cliche. It's something that all organizations that they could successfully implement, they would do it. But please, for the love of everything, build a competent front end of the bullpen. Please. We can go out there and sign a staff all we want. We can sign, we can have the best rotation in baseball. They can all stay healthy. They can give us 7 innings. Don't matter if it's a 2-1 ball game or if it's even close and that guy is Drew Smith coming out of the bullpen. I'm gonna have a problem because that can't happen. So you know what? We don't even need the best rotation. We don't even need as good of a staff as the Brewers did or have in Milwaukee. We don't even need that. We need guys who can get us 4, 5, 6 innings if we're lucky, and we already have that in Quintana and Senga, which is a great start. Maybe another ace, get Yamamoto, but build the front end of the bullpen because I'm tired of seeing these guys like, quite frankly, he's going to be back. Ottavino, we all know him. Smith is 10 years up in the air. And then who am I thinking of? One more guy that I just can't. Get Gott out of here, like, please. So yeah, I don't know if his philosophy changes all too much. We just saw a report, and this goes back to being competitive in 2024 on that topic. I forgot who it was on Twitter or X or whatever you want to call it. He's basically saying, and this is sort of foolish, kind of like an obvious tweet because we all still speculated that the Mets were going to be in on guys like Juan Soto via trade or Shohei Ohtani. Like, we know the Mets are going to be in on it, but when the whole Max Scherzer debacle came out and he said the goal wasn't to win in 2024, all these fans started questioning the front office, and Steve's getting cheap on us already in year 3, all this and that. Well, I forgot who reported it, but basically just reaffirming that the Mets are going to be in on Shohei Ohtani, and they're going to be looking to pursue guys like Juan Soto if they value these guys, and if David Stearns is the one to value these guys. And I think he is. If he's a power guy, he loves power, bring Juan Soto to Queens. And you know what? Don't even wait to do it in free agency. You have the assets to go ahead and trade for him. You have the money now to go and extend him. He's a 24-year-old phenom. Like, we've been speculating about Juan Soto for a while when his status was coming up in question when he was in Washington. Get that man in Queens. Like, those types of guys behind Pete Alonso, who's presumably going to get this extension, is going to make this one of the funnest baseball teams that we've ever witnessed and also around the league has ever witnessed. And let's face it, we need a lot of bolstering on this roster as it currently stands to compete with the Atlanta Braves. And I hate to say it, but we're kind of behind right now. And if we have a lot of catching up to do if we're going to be competitive in 2024. So, yeah, you know what? We have an excess of talent in minor league systems. I'm not saying get rid of them for the sake of getting rid of them, but not all these guys are going to be able to come up in the New York Mets organization and be starters for this team moving forward in their careers. So something's going to have to give. Pitching, fundamentals on defense. We've always talked about Pete Alonso. Rob, you always point out Pete Alonso's defensive or lack of defense, I should say, here and there. It's something that needs to get better. Obviously, Ronnie Mauricio, another guy who we don't know where he's going to be at defensively in the major leagues. Francisco Lindor is the mainstay at shortstop. We all know we have a great defender in him. Brandon Nimmo's a solid defender. We got Gilbert coming up. Defense is going to be something that I'm not really concerned about with the New York Mets, but it is, where's that power coming from if it's not Lindor or Alonso? Where is it coming from? Who's going to be that guy that gets brought in to boost this lineup when those guys are getting pitched around, presumably? Because we saw it all this year. They had no reason to pitch to Pete Alonso in certain situations. I'm not saying I'm not giving that excuse, but who's going to be behind him? Who's going to be that fourth hitter or that fifth hitter right behind Pete Alonso? So, yeah, I'm excited. The bottom line is in my rant, and I know I'm talking a mile a minute here because I'm so excited, and you can just tell how thrilled I am to have David Stearns here. That's not a joke, by the way. I love David Stearns, man. I'm a David Stearns guy. He has a plethora of options, and I think that's the most important thing. The front office didn't leave him with crumbles saying, here, figure it out. The front office put him in a position to succeed right off the bat. And I think that's the most important thing, and I know that he appreciates that as well. So, yeah, that's what it is. I think his philosophy is going to work well, and I think that Steve Cohen, I think like Hayden said earlier in the stream, letting Steve Cohen take that step back and kind of letting just David Stearns take over and just say, Steve, where's the money? Give me the money. I want to play that meme so bad. I wish I had access to that Steve Cohen meme we play on Interstate all the time. Like, pack your bags, kids. Steve Cohen just bought you. But yeah, man, now to end my rant, just excited. I don't think his philosophy changes. I think he's gonna bring over what he learned in the Brewers organization. And he said that in his press conference as well. He said that whatever he learned in the Brewers organization, and even as a in the scouting department under Omar Minaya on the Mets, I think he's gonna bring that same philosophy. So I'm excited.
Yep.
I said that like 5 times already. So
it's cool. So yeah, I agree with that. And this explosive, and a couple of people talking about like 2024, and they're not going to be that good. Can we be completely honest? Did we watch the Arizona Diamondbacks and the Miami Marlins scare away from a wild card spot, and they just fell into one? You know why? Because they're not very good. And I'm saying this to the day I die. This year, the Mets were better than the Marlins and the Diamondbacks, and probably even the Cubs. They just had one of the worst months of the year in June, and it completely just spilled over into nonsense. Those teams that are in the playoffs right now had 2 weeks of great baseball. That's all they had. That's how they stood into it. So it's funny how people are like, oh, why would Stearns come in? If Stearns is going to do that, he would trade everybody away. Like, they're not bad enough to say, let's punt on 2024. And they're not great enough saying that we should go all in once again to let's see if we can win the division and a World Series. They're going to be a competitive team. You know why? Because you've seen they were actually competitive against teams that are actually in the playoffs. And the Marlins and the Diamondbacks shouldn't be in the playoffs either. Like, they had a decent season, those teams, but they're not that good. That's why the National League is a lot easier to make the playoffs. And if the Mets can do that, and again, we saw the Phillies with 87 wins who looked competitive and made the World Series. So you don't have to, and like Chris says, bullpen is very important. Look at the ERAs in the National League. Not very good. The Braves have injuries in their rotation. The Dodgers have injuries rotation. Woodruff is not pitching in the playoffs now for the Brewers. These pitching staffs are not very good. Like Taijuan Walker, who everybody wanted back, has a 4.5 ERA with the Phillies, and he's basically their number 3. And even Wheeler has a 3 ERA. So it comes down to they can't have months like June. If they don't have months like June, if they would have had a 500 June, they would have been right in the mix at the end of the year. That's all they had to do was be 500 in June, and it could have been all different. If they were, 12-12, look at the record. They would be close. They would be around the 500 team, which a couple of games over will get you into the playoffs. So, Hayden, philosophy for Stearns, do you think it's going to be similar, or it's going to be a little bit more different knowing that he has the resources of Steve Cohen?
Yeah, I mean, I think, you look at his mentality in Milwaukee when, it was a cheaper market team, like you said, power and pitching, the 2 Ps. And, now he's coming over to this team. And, that was kind of an interesting thing that I thought originally is, you're going to have an owner who has, endless amount of money in his pockets. And then David Stearns, a guy who's used to, I don't want to say a little bit more Moneyball, but a little bit more, I guess essentially so, more analytic and on the cheaper side. And I think you combine that, and I think that's honestly, I kind of feel like that's somewhat where Major League Baseball is going now. It's a mixture of money and analytics. And I think that is what I've been a big proponent of all along. You guys know on my channel, very big on analytics, Baseball Savant, Fangraphs, StatMuse, all that excellent stuff that people look at me and say, what language is that? I think that's important in today's game to have a good mix of that. And I think that is the mentality that the Mets are going to go on to now. When Cohen took over, the analytic team wasn't really, it was a thing, but it wasn't very effective. 2021, it was building its way up. Last year, building its way up. And I think now we're starting to see more of it. And I think next year in 2024 is when we're really going to see that really start to come into play. I think power is very important. Could be a controversial take, but the small ball mentality doesn't really work in 2023 baseball. You look at a team like the Guardians this year, they tried that. I just don't think that facade works anymore. In 1980, 1990, yeah, maybe, but I just personally I don't believe that works anymore. I think power wins championships, power and pitching. I really do agree with that mentality. You look at some of the best teams in baseball. The Yankees, the Braves, the Rays. Power, 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 power. Home run, home run, home run. And I think that's what the Mets need to start to do. It's good to have your couple table setters in the lineup. You have that. Start to add, a little bit more power. I think that's going to be huge. I'm not saying everyone in this lineup needs to have, 50 home runs, but, and it's good. We saw this year. You had what? 4 guys had more 20, 24 more home runs. Well, what happened? Well, when you have Steven Nagosuk and, pitchers like that coming in and blowing leads and, going 2 and a third inning, yeah, it's kind of hard to win ball games. So I definitely think it's a combined effort of power and pitching. I think this team is going to, embrace more analytics, embrace more of that, also spend money at the same time. But I think they're going to focus heavily on pitching and power. And like Chris said, the bullpen. People forget about a bullpen. With the pitch clock, with pitchers only going 5-6 inning, it's not like guys are going 8-9 innings anymore. Back to back to back to back appearances. Guys are going 5-6 innings, and that we saw it this year with the pitch clock. Guys are not going as long. And then, you're going to have a bullpen arm for the 6th, the 7th, the 8th, and the 9th. I get it. Diaz is coming back. You have the 9th selected. Ottavino will probably be back, so that's 1 inning. You'd like to have Rayleigh back. That's another inning, but you need a super bullpen. And when you have guys like Drew Smith and Steven Nagosik and Trevor Gott, are you kidding me? Who? I hate to sound unprofessional, but they're absolute dog shit. Man, Dominic Leone too. He was a Frank the Tank favorite on his videos. He would have songs mimicking him. Maybe that was the only good thing about the bullpen is Frank would give me a good laugh. But yeah, you need to build a bullpen. And I'm not saying, I'm not going to go out and sign someone really aggressive. Make Josh Hader an 8th inning guy. I'm not saying that, but you need to have a super bullpen, and that's when analytics tie in. You look at a team like the Rays, then Brooks Raley, someone like that. You need that because it's not going to work with these nobody relievers and they come in and blow games. And you need to have so I think, like I said, to put a pin in everything that I'm saying, a mixture of power and pitching, analytics and old school mentality. And then you need a bullpen. If you're not going to have an elite rotation, you need a more than adequate above par bullpen.
Yeah. And speaking of bullpen, don't forget about Yacobonis, right? Yacobonis was was the man. Yaka. All right, I'm sorry. I just had to say it because I actually saw Yacobonis. He was actually at Citi Field yesterday for some reason. He wasn't in uniform, but he actually came to the 7-line section and hung out with the fans. So that was kind of cool. So Nelson, philosophy. What do you think?
Well, I don't know how many people saw, obviously everyone saw the press conference, but Steve Gelbs then interviewed Stearns afterward, and I was almost more intrigued by what Stearns had to say during that interview than anything he said while he was at the podium. He mentioned how much of an influence Omar Minaya had on him back when he was an intern. He mentioned the importance of scouting. And not just, I know everybody thinks, analytics, scouting's not as important, blah, blah, blah. Well, he mentioned the importance of scouting. He mentioned the influence the 98, 99, and 2000 Mets had on him as a fan and his philosophy towards building a roster. One of the things he said was the fact that those teams, it's not the roster you start with isn't always the roster you finish with at the end of the season. So he meant the importance of keeping an open mind and having a plan, but being able to shift your focus, kind of like the Mets did this year in a some would say a negative way, but they had a mindset of where they were going to go. It didn't work, so they shifted. He's obviously thinking along those lines as well. I might have a plan to start the season, but that doesn't mean I have to stick with it throughout. I can adjust and be open-minded, and I like that about what he had to say. I like that he's not just going to ignore the old school aspect of baseball. It needs to be a mix of the analytics with the old school. And when he built his teams in Milwaukee, yeah, it's obvious. Pitching and power were important to him. He built a rotation that has been very consistent throughout his tenure there. He built a very solid bullpen as well. One thing that his draft team, they drafted a lot of outfielders. I don't know if that's like a personal philosophy of his. But he did draft a lot of outfielders. We'll see if that's a thing with the Mets going forward. But yeah, I don't expect him to change the way he thinks as far as how you build a team. I don't think he's going to decide, oh, okay, we're going to move forward and play small ball and steal 100 bases and this and the other. I just don't see him doing that. That's just not the way the game is really shifting to be played that way anyways. I mean, I know they changed the rules because they wanted more guys to get on base and hit singles and steal more, but at the end of the day, it's still pitching and power. That's what the focus is. I think that's what the focus is going to be. Most teams are going to head that or try to head that direction. So when you get guys like Ohtani available and Soto, obviously, yeah, those are going to be guys that he's probably going to be trying to go after because they provide that power. They provide power that we don't have outside of Alonso and Lindor. I mean, maybe Ronnie can develop that if we keep him. He was had pretty decent power numbers in the minors. Alvarez obviously has very good power, but we saw he had his ups and downs too. With the kids, you can't just expect them to be the saviors because they're going to take time. Even in their second year, they're going to have their sophomore slumps and this and that and the other. So I don't know. I have confidence in what Stearns is going to do. I just think he needs to obviously get his guy in at the manager spot. We've talked about it. I can see what everyone's saying about how a manager is not as important and they don't make as many decisions. But I think when it comes to in-game decisions, the manager is still making. I don't think the manager is getting phone calls in the middle of the game telling them what to do. Like, I don't believe that. Some people might. I just don't think that's a thing that happens. I think at the end of the day, the manager has to be able to think on the fly and make his own decisions. And I think Stearns has to hire a guy that he trusts to make those decisions. When it comes to lineups and this and that and the other, obviously it's a team effort. The analytic guys and the manager and the other coaches, they all probably talk and figure that all out. But when it comes to in-game decision-making, I think that's something that the manager does need to do and he does do on his own. And we need a guy that's able to be competent in that sense. So that's something that would be interesting to see what the philosophy is there, what the philosophy is as far as I know. He said he would interview guys without experience and guys with experience. He's not pigeonholing it to like one thing. So yeah, I'm curious to see where we go with the manager because I feel like that kind of just springboards everything else and what else happens throughout the offseason.
Yeah, and you made a good point about the drafting of the Brewers. It's a lot of outfielders. I actually realized that too when I was looking at the drafting of them. And yeah, you're right. There's a lot of outfielders. But you know what? The Mets draft shortstops every single time. So at least there's 3 spots in the outfield and only 1 in shortstop. So I guess it's not bad if you draft 10 outfielders for 3 spots. Hopefully at least a handful pan out. 50% will be, pretty damn good. So yeah, I agree with the philosophy aspect. I think it's going to be – I think that if David Stearns knows that he likes a player, he's not handcuffed by the money situation anymore. And I think that's a big deal because if he's as smart as everybody say he is and the recognition and all the, the glamour of everybody saying, and Steve Cohen said it, he spoke to baseball people when he went to owners meetings and all that. People said, you got to hire this guy. So if he's as good as he says he is, and he puts people around him that know what the hell they're doing, then having that extra resource in money can only in a bigger picture can actually, hopefully be a good thing going forward. Because if he doesn't have the money and he gets the Brewers what he got in the playoffs 5 out of the last 6 years, you would think he can do just as good a job, if not better, with some money. So before we get to our final thoughts, I think it's good that David Stearns is here. Obviously, he has a lot of work to do, and people who are in the chat that are killing Billy Epler, I was one of those guys that were killing Billy Epler in 2022, right? But then, I kind of took the emotion a year later out of it, and there was nothing really Billy Epler can do, because there was probably 5 guys in our farm system that the Mets were willing to trade, or I'm sorry, that teams wanted from the Mets farm system to get better at the deadline, and 4 of those 5 guys are currently on the 2023 Mets. So we didn't have nobody to trade unless you wanted to trade Alvarez or Beatty or Vientos or Mauricio, right? There was nowhere to go with that unless you wanted to completely deplete your farm system. And yeah, in retrospect, look what the Mets farm system is now. But just a year and a half ago at the deadline last year, guess what? They didn't have a farm system like that. So if they would have depleted their farm system to get who they wanted and there wasn't greatness out there to get, I think that it wasn't really Billy Epler's in that his fault. And it's not like, and then now with this year, I don't know what people wanted. Like, I didn't hear people chiming for Nathan Eovaldi or, or other guys. Like, there wasn't anybody, even, everybody wanted Andrew Chafin. Andrew Chafin didn't have a good year. And Epler did put a good bullpen together until Diaz went down. And then Ottavino actually had to be better in the 8th. David Robinson, who was supposed to be the 8th inning guy, is now the closer. Really had to bounce up. That moved everybody up. And I think that transition kind of messed with a lot of people's heads, unfortunately. So I didn't know what Billy Epler can do this offseason. Like, if you didn't get DeGrom, you had to get Verlander. And it's not like Verlander was bad for us. He was very good for us. The Mets just went a different route, knowing they weren't going to compete in 2023. That's just the way it is. So we're going to go with the final thoughts. And with that final thoughts, I'm going to ask everybody one question. So when you say your final thoughts, give me an answer. What one player do you want the Mets to get via trade or free agency that you want 100% on the Mets? I'm going to start with Hayden. Final thoughts and the one player the Mets via trade or free agent you want 100%.
Got me on the spot. Any player from trade or free agency. Probably my main 2. I would like to see Yamamoto and Juan Soto. I think those are 2 names of 2 guys that I think the Mets could go for in free agency or trade, preferably free agency for Soto's case too, but we'll see how that goes. But yeah, those are 2 guys. Mets Talk with Hayden is the name. Well, baseball's over for the Mets at least, so we have a month of postseason and living in misery, but at least I have football and hockey coming up, so we'll see how that goes. But I'm definitely gonna, like I said, try and be more active on the channel. Gonna probably do a Mets Talk live stream hopefully next week, and then my season recap, and then my off-season preview, as well as Buck Showalter, David Stearns, and all that great stuff. Appreciate Rob, Nelson, and Chris, and everyone for being on here. Great to see everyone. And it's definitely gonna be an exciting time for the Mets Roundtable podcast in regards to what was I going to say? In regards to the off season. So we'll see how that goes. And
All right, Chris.
I'm usually, I don't know what to tell you, man. Comment for everything.
I agree. So, Chris, a player via trade or free agency that you want 100% on the Mets, and your final thoughts.
I mean, I'm going to go a similar route. It's Juan Soto, 100%. I know the popular answer probably is Shohei Ohtani across the fan base. Give me Juan Soto, man. Give me Juan Soto. Brandon Nimmo is fine in outfield, obviously. Locked him up. Great job. We have Marte. His future is in flux with the Mets, even though he's got another year or two left on his deal. But man, Juan Soto would be electric at Citi Field, to be honest with you. I always think about that one game where I forgot who it was in the Mets booth, but they basically said that he isn't a power hitter, and he just belted a home run off the face of the
Keith
scoreboard.
Hernandez.
It was Keith, right? I remember that. And yeah, it would just be great to see him in orange and blue, man. Finally, just get him on our side for once after years of torture. That he put on the Mets. So in terms of MEZ's question, what's the trade package? Nobody becomes untouchable at that point in a trade for Juan Soto. You do have some leverage over the Padres at that point. So maybe you can preserve a guy like Jet Williams. You can preserve a guy like Gilbert, but maybe you have to part ways with a guy like, Acuna. And that just is what it is. The Padres, were a top 10 team, or a top 10 farm at one point. They kind of lowered themselves by going through with that Juan Soto trade. The Hader trade was in there as well at some point. So the Mets do have some leverage. But if I had to predict what a trade package would look like, the Padres are still going to go after their guy who they want in the Mets farm system. And at the end of the day, I think the Padres can fully walk away with it and trade him to whoever they really want to trade him to. So, you talk about a guy like Ryan Clifford, you can start to throw him in that conversation. I know I don't want to judge what he's done so far in the Mets organization, but, I know he's a little bit more versatile, but Ryan Clifford could definitely be used as trade bait. I would probably, out of the untouchables that we said between Acuna, Williams, and Gilbert at this rate, I don't know if Acuna makes the trade happen. You gotta do it. To be honest with you, that's why you got him in a deal for Max Scherzer, right? This is what you got him for. You might have him as a starter moving forward, but you can easily flip him, and it'd be a Juan Soto for Max Scherzer type trade. I'm taking that all day long. Like, come on now, that's what it would equate to. So no, I mean, in all seriousness, the Mets have, out of any sort of trade targets, minus maybe with the Brewers because that owner hates Steve Cohen, the Mets are in the driver's seat now in terms of who they can give up, and they have the flexibility to do so. So I'll just address MEZ's comment that way. But Juan Soto, 100% for me. I'll just give you one. I can go down the list, but I'll give you Juan Soto. CP New York Sports, subscribe to the YouTube channel, all that fun stuff. If you're a New York sports fan in general, not just the Mets, I talk Knicks, I talk Giants, I talk Rangers, I talk sports betting, man. Come on, make some money over with me. Subscribe to the channel. You won't regret it. Thank you, guys. I appreciate the roundtable as always. We'll be back. Interstate Mets Report, providing you some coverage too, Nelson and I on our channel. So appreciate it. Thank you, everybody.
Awesome. Nelson, what do you got, buddy?
Hey, what's up, everybody? Yeah, I'm Nelson, Amish Country Mets fan. Please, if you haven't, love it if you go subscribe to the channel. I'll be definitely putting out tons of off-season content. I'm not stopping. We're going to keep talking Mets one way or another. As far as the question is concerned, I'd love Soto, don't get me wrong. I just don't know what it's going to take. I don't even know if the Padres are necessarily going to trade him. So I'm not going to go that route. I'm going to say Yamamoto. I want to build around pitching. I love the kid. He's not really a kid, but you know what I mean. Love the guy. I like his stuff, everything I hear about him. Obviously, what we saw with Senga, if we can package that with Yamamoto and he's a stud, just like Senga is, that could be a pretty lethal rotation. He would be my main target. If you ask me to pick a bat, money is no object, and he's willing to come here. Give me Shohei Ohtani. I don't care. After Yamamoto, give me Ohtani. Stick him in that lineup behind Pete, and let's roll. So those are my two guys. Appreciate everybody that was watching. Thank you guys, Rob, Chris, obviously, and Aiden. You guys are great. Always good to talk to you guys. Yeah, and I know everybody's got a football game to watch. Well, I think some of us anyway. So have a great night, everybody. Let's go, Mets.
Great stuff, guys. And the guys that I want to, when it comes to one guy I want, or at least a way to look at it, Soto, I think it's a no-brainer. I think you do what you got to do to get him, and we have the depth to do so. But Eduardo Rodriguez, I know he's going to opt out of that Detroit deal. I think that he's a guy that is probably going to be out there. It's probably going to be less money than probably Yamamoto. Even though I think the Mets are almost a guarantee to get Yamamoto. He went to the agency that represents Senga and Diaz. Yamamoto's been talked about with the Mets just as much as Stearns have. And I think there's, when there's smoke, there's fire. And with the Billy Upton connection to the Japanese players and with Senga probably in his ear, I think Yamamoto's going to be easily a Met. I'll be shocked if he isn't, just as much as Ohtani to the Dodgers. It seems inevitable. So Erod and Soto is my two guys. So, guys, 2023 is over. Thank heavens. We look forward to 2024 and everybody's content for the hot stove, off-season, draft, everything that we're going to be talking about throughout the season. I'm a Cowboys fan, so Giants, please lose. That would be nice. I apologize. I know it's going to piss off a lot of people, including a couple of the boys here. I do apologize, but guys, it's been a pleasure. Thank you for tuning in to another Mets Roundtable podcast. Nelson, Chris, Hayden, and myself, subscribe to the channels, guys. A lot of content for the offseason will be popping up. We're all going to be collaborating throughout the offseason through hopefully one of the best offseasons in Mets history, hopefully, with David Stearns at the helm. So with that said, everybody have a great night. Go Cowboys. As always, Mets fans, let's go Mets. We'll see you next time, guys. Have a great night.
Let's go Mets.
I love GM, baby.
They go to meet the Mets. Oh, they're hollering and cheering and they're jumping in their seats. Where do they go? To meet the Mets. All the fans are true to the orange and blue. So hurry up and come.